All right, so I'm here with Pam Mandel, who is an ex-member of the Castaways, Seattle's loudest ukulele band. Not ex because she was fired, but ex because the band has since disbanded, I believe.
Yeah, we're defunct.
Yeah, that's too bad.
It's sad. Yeah.
So why don't we start with you introducing yourself and kind of how you got involved with the Castaways and what your story with the ukulele is?
Okay. Wow, that's a whole thing. That's a whole that's quite the on-ramp. Um, let's see. Okay, so my name is Pam Mandel and I live in Seattle, Washington, and I picked up my first uke after my first trip to Hawaii, where I got kind of crazy from the sound of it. I heard this sound and I was like, I want that. How do I make that sound? Um, I had a really funny sequence of events. It occurs to me that you may not know this story, Brad.
Hit me.
Um, a very funny sequence of events happened, or serendipitous, coincidental series of events happened. So I did this trip to Hawaii with my family. It was my mom's, it was a significant birthday for my mom. And so my whole family did this trip to the Big Island. And I was like, that is a noise I need to make myself at home. And about a week after I got home, I had been sort of shopping for an instrument and I hadn't found one and I hadn't found one. And I didn't know how to play at all, right? I had I had never picked up a uke ever. Um, and so I was shopping and getting I knew enough because I played the guitar very briefly when I was quite young, and I knew enough about it that I knew that I didn't want to completely cheap out. I didn't want to buy garbage because then it was just going to sit around getting dusty and I wasn't going to play it. Um, so I wasn't going to drop, $25 for a toy or for something that didn't feel good when I held it. So I'd handled a lot of expensive instruments over the course of maybe this week or so after I got back. And then I was at my friend's place and they were cleaning out their house and I was standing on their porch and they said, "Hey, do you want this ukulele?" And I was like, "What? Yes, actually I do want this ukulele." So they gave me they just handed it to me. And then probably a week later, after I got this uke from my friends, I was visiting with a friend of mine who had been learning how to play the viola and had been hanging out at a music store here in Seattle. So he'd been taking these viola lessons and he knew that I had wanted to play the uke. And he came back one day from doing this lesson at the music store and he handed me this flyer. And he said, "Look, the Seattle Ukulele Players Association is they're starting to hold these song circles at Dusty Strings, this music store in Fremont." That was probably a week after I picked up my first uke. So he handed me this thing and I went, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. Like I had no idea. And it turns out that the uke that my friends had given me was a baritone and almost everybody there was playing a soprano. So I was like doing things, it didn't sound right. Everything was totally wrong, but I was in a room full of all these happy people, all of them, playing songs and stuff. And I sat next to this old guy named Jack who had this beautiful old koa uke where the headstock had been like repaired with a giant bolt. It was totally Frankensteined, and he like whacked me on the arm and he was like, "Don't worry, you'll get it. You'll figure it out." So while I was there that very day, one of the guys who helped found that organization got up front and he said, "Hey, we're doing this like first annual 10-day ukulele symposium up at this halau in the North End. There's a big Hawaii population here. So they were doing this 10 days. We're going to do this like test program, see how it goes." And so he had flyers this is the first time I had been to Song Circle, right? With my very first ukulele that I had acquired after my first trip to Hawaii. So I'd pick up this flyer for these 10 days of classes and I don't know, it was cheap. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm doing this. Of course I'm doing this." Because obviously I'm fated to do this. And it was starting, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks subsequently. So, but in the meantime, I had been doing some reading and I was like, "Oh, I need to get a soprano. This is what I want. I want a soprano. That's the sound I want. That's the instrument I need." And I've been knocking around pawn shops downtown and I was in a pawn shop that tragically is not there anymore because the landscape of our city has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. But I walked into this pawn shop and, you go into these divey pawn shops and they got a million electric guitars up front. And this ginormous man at the back of the shop says, "Hey, can I help you? Are you looking for something?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm looking for a ukulele. I see you don't have any." And he was like, "No, no, no, come back here. Come back here." And he hands me this Martin, this beautiful vintage Martin. And I'm like, and it was, now I know that it was actually quite cheap. But at the time I knew nothing, and he wanted $400 for this beautiful vintage Martin. I'm kind of kicking myself now for not being like, yeah, now I would buy it. But at the time I was like, no, I don't know how to play. It seems stupid. I can't buy this thing. Um, and, um, and he was like, no, and I was like, no, that's too much money. I'm not dropping $400 on an instrument I don't know how to play. I'm not going to do that. And he said, "Oh, well, I have this other thing." And he reached behind me and he handed me this uke, which I should go get it. Can you hold on a second?
Yeah, sure.
Beautiful. Hang on, it's right there. Okay. Okay, so he handed me this ukulele, which I will show you in a minute, and I picked it up and I strummed it. And again, you have to remember that, like, I know like 3 chords maybe, and they were for the baritone. And I just like, I held this thing and I was like, oh, okay, all right. What I ended up with was this, which is it's called an Aloha Royal. Oh, it's a little dusty. I don't play it much anymore. This is the Hawaii State Crest up here. It's a beautiful mahogany instrument. I think it's from the 70s. It sounded exactly like that sound that I wanted, right? So everything just kind of like fell, like I was supposed to do this. If I had said no at any point in this path, we wouldn't be talking right now. But apparently it felt weirdly like the universe was like, yeah, you're going to do this thing. Here you go. So, I mean, I have a ridiculous fleet of these things now, but this was the one that I bought, and this is the one that I really learned how to play on. And I really love this little instrument. It sounds like a 1920s. It just has the most perfect, I don't know how well it sounds over all of this, but I love the sound of it. And I really did, like, it just resonated when I picked it up and held it and felt right in my hands. And this was the one that I took to classes. So yeah, that's kind of how I started playing, because all these things were like, you're going to play this funny little instrument, and this is what the fates have determined for you.
That's great.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Everybody has a story similar to that, I think, when getting into playing the instrument.
Yeah. It was funny. It was like I had no control over the matter, right? Like, oh, and this thing, by the way, it was $30.
Perfect.
Right. So I'm quite convinced, having done a fair bit of research, and now that I know a lot more about these little guys, that it's worth considerably more than $30. But at the time, I was like, yeah. The thing is, I wasn't even going to buy it, right? I was like, I don't know. I don't really know how to play. I don't know. And then it was $30. So of course I brought it home. So yeah.
So how did you end up in the band, if we flash forward a little bit?
So if we fast forward a little bit, so I have been involved with our ukulele club for a long time now. And one of the guys from the band, he wanted to start this project. He had this idea that he wanted to start this project, and he sent email to the mailing list for the song circle for the club, saying that they were looking specifically for a female voice. They wanted somebody who could sing and could play some ukulele. So, and I had been feeling kind of topped out. Like, I had taught myself as much as I felt like I could. I was like, my skills were really flattening, and I wanted to find a way to do something new with music, because I was having a really good time, but I wasn't feeling challenged. So I answered the ad that Jim sent to the club, and I said, I was like, I don't even know if I really want to do this, or if I have the skills that you need, or what. But I'd love to come and play with you guys for an evening and see how it goes. So,
Must have went fairly well.
yeah, it went okay. It went okay. The thing is, I went and I sat with them, and at the time they had just picked up a drummer. He started the same. They had got him a week before, so it's the first time I met him, and he had played with them 1 week only. So I went and sat in with them in Jim's living room. I'm trying to remember if the bass player was there or not that night. I think he might not have been. Maybe he was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I went and sat in with them for an evening, and they were like, "Yeah, that was great. See you next week." And I was like, "Hold on a minute." Right? I was like, just hang on. And at the time, this was the same, this was in October or November, and I had planned to come back to the Big Island to go to music camp that winter, right? And I was like, I'm gonna go do this music thing on the Big Island, and I'm gonna think about it, and let me see how I feel when I get back. They auditioned a couple of other people over the course of the winter, and it turns out that a lot of getting in a band involves just being able to show up, right? Yeah. Carry your gear, show up. It turns out that maybe there's less skill and more common sense involved than I initially had thought. So when I got back, I was like, yeah, I'd like to come play again and see how it goes. And then I just kept going. And we played together for 7 years, I think. I think it was 7 years.
That's great.
It was great. Yeah.
And so your kind of thing, your shtick with the band was playing rowdy rock songs with the ukulele. How many people were you normally?
5.
Okay.
We were 5. So we were a drummer who played the cajon, our bass player who played the U-bass, and then 3 uke players. We had 2 guys who could really lay down the licks, and I played with the rhythm section. And everybody except for the drummer sang also. Although I think our last bass player, we went through some bass players.
Everybody does.
Which is a thing. We went through some bass players, and our last bass player mostly did not sing. Sometimes he did some harmony, some backup stuff, but in general he didn't sing. So it was down to the 3 of us, those of us with the ukes that would do the vocals. So yeah, but we were 5, yeah. And we were like classic rock band configuration, right? Like rhythm, 2 leads, drummer, bass.
So how would you classify your role in the group, and what did you learn kind of in that context?
Oh, that's a good question. So I learned a lot. So I had never really done stage performance of any serious kind before. Like I'd never been on a stage with anything beyond just like a community group kind of thing, right? Like I would never have said, like, you know, when so the club would do all these community events, and we'd show up and there'd be 25 players there, right? Like you don't have to carry much when there's 25 people. You could be really bad. I mean, it's I'm not saying that necessarily those kind of groups are. They can be really skilled, but there's a lot carrying you along, right? And so I had never had to do, like, I'd never had my own mic, right? I'd always shared a mic. It's never been just like my voice, right? So I learned, first I learned that I had some pretty bad stage fright. I'm not a super comfortable performer, but I also learned that, like, if you all, like, there's definitely a greater, let me back up a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. The sum of the parts is greater than the individuals. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Like when you play in a band, it doesn't benefit you. Like if you're one extremely skilled player and you are not working with all of your people to make a greater whole, it doesn't matter. It's not going to come together, right? Like the band's a machine that all the parts have to work together. And if they don't, your band's not going to be any good. So that's a thing I learned for sure, was this like collaborative nature of things. You're smiling like you have had some experience with this. That was definitely a big lesson. I learned that like I have pretty good timing, and that's an actual skill. I didn't know.
That's a
And
big deal.
and playing with other people taught me that like my timing's good, and it matters. And I missed a few gigs for various reasons. I was traveling or I couldn't make it. It's some conflicts and stuff. And every time I wasn't there, the guys would be like, yeah, whatever you were doing, we actually noticed it wasn't there. And I felt really modest and underqualified, because the guys I played with were like professional musicians for many, many years, various roles in the Seattle scene. And I didn't have any of that stuff, but it was whatever it was that I brought to the table made this thing be bigger than it was when I wasn't there. So, it taught me not to underestimate my skills. And then this is something that you and I have talked about sort of off the mic, but I really liked being the least skilled person in the band. I never wanted to be the best musician in the room, because then it meant that I wasn't learning.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't as fun for me. I wanted it to be challenging. I wanted it to be hard. And I really appreciated the opportunity to play with people who were so much better, so much more grounded in music than I was, because every time we went to play, I would learn something new. And it might not necessarily be a big takeaway lesson like, oh, that's a new skill, or like some riff that I nailed or something specific, but I always felt like, oh, I'm growing as a musician by playing with these people who are so much better than I am.
Yeah. Learning by osmosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so important, is not being the person that everybody else looks up to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's kind of a balance in a band where you're collectively, everybody's moving at a sustainable pace, so there's not one person dragging everybody else.
Right.
But, also being the best person you are kind of, I think, hindered by your other bandmates a little bit in that sense, if the levels aren't matching up. But certainly being the worst guy in the band is like the best possible situation.
Yeah,
at least
I mean,
in my opinion.
Your bandmates need to sort of co-sign on that. Like, they need to be patient with you and be willing to bring you along. And I was lucky that I had these guys who were like, they knew I was new, and they were like, nah, it's worth it. It's worth it. Like, they thought it was worth it to invest in the time to play with me because of what I brought to the table. Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was really great. I miss it a lot. Yeah.
And so you guys, you hung it up fairly recently.
Yeah, a year and a half ago, I think, maybe 2 years ago.
Did it just run its course?
So there was some of that. Some of that was because so our sort of the guy who was sort of our shredder was losing his hearing, and he had been playing super loud rock and roll his whole life, and we were following in that tradition. Which I know still, it's funny, you look at this and you're like, what were you guys doing exactly? What, I don't, like, the people who hadn't seen us live, they didn't quite understand what it was we were doing. But so he was losing his hearing, and his doctor was like, you got to stop playing this super loud music. You're going to lose whatever you've got left. And our drummer had tendonitis, and we're all like we were getting kind of old. And it's sad, but we played hard and we played loud, and it was just got to be kind of like too hard to keep it going. And we had a lot of, the other thing was that, like, it's not our job, right? Playing music full time was not our job for any of us. And so we had other things that were in the way. One of the guy who started the band, had a small son, and, there's just stuff going on that got in the way. For a while we were playing, like, we'd play 30 shows over the course of a summer, right? We do a lot of playing out. And then the stuff just kind of started getting in the way of that. It's just a tough way it was hard for us to manage all those schedules, 5 people with 5 different schedules whose job is not to do this full time. So yeah. But it was solid while it was coming together. It was great.
Nice. Well, you talk about playing super loud. I mean, I only got to see the Castaways once, which is
Right.
too bad. But I feel like it seemed to me like it was a good solid show, and there's an
Thank you.
entire it was an entire disco set.
Yeah, you saw. So we did that set just that particular year. That wasn't our. That wasn't our. We didn't usually play that much disco. The year before, so you saw us. Was that 2017? I think.
That sounds about right. But
Sounds
as a
right.
folk festival,
You were at Folklife, yeah. So
folk
that was
life.
2017. But the year before, we played this like solid slamming 70s, um, full on rock show that we opened with. Won't Get Fooled Again, The Who. Jim worked out there's this keyboard bit at the beginning that Jim worked out to play on the uke. It was amazing. It was amazing. We played The Wall, Pink Floyd. We put together, it was a super political set. We ended with It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine. It was shortly after the 2016 election that we put this set together. So, and it was intentionally political, and it was loud, and there was a bunch of stuff at our feet. Like it was all going through all this electronic stuff, right? So we all had this array of effects pedals on the ground, and it was like solid rock and roll, but it was all on the ukulele. It was super fun. So, and you saw our disco set, which was the year later, when we were trying to be like a little bit more like a little more love and peace. But the year before we were angry, and it was so awesome. Yeah, we loved that set.
How did you guys deal with the stage volumes? I mean,
monitors.
Amplifying ukuleles on a loud stage in general gets kind of messy. Did you have any tricks?
No, we played a lot of different stages, and it all depended on what the crew was like, who we were working with, right?
Right.
Our bass player ran our sound. Our last bass player ran sound for us, and he did a pretty good job. But there were so many variables that had to do with venues and what the crew was like and what the room noise was like, and so many things going on. I remember the first time we played a dive bar down the hill from me, and we went in to set up, and they had a house sound guy, and he thought we were just going to be some like Hawaiian group. And we got there, and we had all this gear, and we're laying all this stuff out, and he was like, "Why are you so complicated?" And we played a party once where the sound guy said to us, "You guys are not supposed to be this loud." And we're like, first of all, you're the sound guy, you control this, and secondly, yeah, we actually are supposed to be this loud. So it was often challenging, and then every now and then we would get a stage where the sound guy, and it was almost always guys, but every now and then there'd be women, they just had it dialed. So they'd have good gear, they'd have a good sound guy, they'd have good monitors, and they'd have enough so that we could each have our own. So there was a million variables. So it was actually could be really frustrating sometimes, depending on what the room was.
Yeah, it's absolutely hit or miss, especially if you're working with unknown people.
Yeah, which we did often. Often we didn't know the sound guy. Every now and then we'd show at a venue, and it'd be the same guy, and we'd be like, "This is going to be great," because we've worked with this guy before, and they always remembered us because we were that super loud ukulele band.
Right.
And some of the festivals asked for us. They were like, "Can we get that band back on our stage, please? Because they're super fun." But other times they would just be like, "I don't get what you're trying to do here. Like, what are you trying to do?" And we're like, "Dude, we're just a rock band. Just like treat us like we're a rock band." Like, they didn't take us seriously,
Mm-hmm.
which could be difficult at the setup. Once they heard us play, like there's one other thing, which is that a lot of those festival stages, we wouldn't get a proper sound check, and we'd just have to roll with it. And sometimes that could be really aggravating. Right? Like you'd end up with a monitor where you couldn't hear yourself at all. Or, I'd hear the guy down there really very, very well, and that was about it. So it was a mixed bag. Yeah.
Yeah, live sound is always a trip.
Yeah. We had a freelance guy who, if we were doing a gig where we got some good money, we would bring our own sound guy. And that was always great.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. But rare, right? Rare. Most of the time we'd go to the venue, we'd do it ourselves, or they'd have a sound guy who was completely flustered by us, or we'd be on a festival stage where they'd be like, plug in and play, right? And you'd just be like, we need a minute, like we got stuff. They're like, we thought you were just a ukulele band. We're like, no, did you read that? We had a spec sheet, all the stuff, we'd send it over. I think they just ignored it. And they would see ukulele and they would stop thinking about the rest of it. And there we'd be like, I can't hear, like my effects aren't working. Like I can't hear the effects in the monitors. Can you give me some more whatever? Or, balancing. Anyway, it was tough. It was tough.
Yeah, part of the journey, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So if people are interested, are the CDs still available? Is there any way to hear the Castaways in all their glory?
Yeah, we still have. So the only way to have really heard us in all our glory was to hear us live, because the recordings, like we have 2 CDs and they're still for sale, and you can get them through CD Baby. And the best way to find us is to really just search for Castaways and ukulele, and you'll find our stuff. And the CDs are still up there, and there are some videos on YouTube also. There's actually a pretty good video of American Idiot, Green Day's American Idiot. That one's good, and has a pretty, you get a pretty good idea of what we sounded like. But it's also like, that's recorded audio, it's not live. And for me, I thought of us as a live band more than anything else. Like you needed to see us live to get the idea of what we were about.
Yeah, I certainly got that impression, because I'm in Hawaii, Pam's in Seattle, and it's not like we had lots of opportunities to cross paths. But hearing the recordings and seeing the videos and then seeing you guys live at the festival was like, oh.
Right. Now I get it, right? Like it's really different. Yeah. And that, going back to one of the things that you asked me earlier about what I had learned, and that was definitely a thing that I had learned about the difference of what it's like to play music for recording and to play it live, and what that feels like, and what that feels like just to perform live music. It was, every now and then, I don't know, every now and then, like you get this thing that happens when your band is playing and everything's super tight and the sound is good and the crowd is into it. Like all this magic happens, right? It's like you get super high on it. And it's really, really fun. And you don't get that playing in the studio, and you don't get that just sitting around playing in your kitchen, which I do a lot. And you don't get that playing with just a handful of friends on the back deck, right? Like we played a festival, a street festival, maybe 3 summers ago, and they put us on a big stage with the risers and the big metal framing with the lights and all the stuff, right? And the sound crew was amazing, and we'd been working really hard. And we got up and we played. Like it's one of these times I think of, like when you get together with your band and you play really well and you know it, right? You come off the stage and you're like, that was amazing. And I think about that all the time. And we never quite you don't get that quality when you record, and you don't get that feeling from listening to the CDs either. They're beautifully done, and that guy who mixed them for us did a great job. I love the way they sound, but it's just such a different experience.
Yeah.
I suppose it's true for all live music. You go see a great live show and you're like, that's what this is all about. It's not about the CD that I'm playing while I'm making dinner or whatever. Yeah.
So live after Castaways, you were just, before we came live here, talking about being a self-conscious player when you're playing solo.
Yeah.
But you can get on stage with the band and do the whole rock star thing.
Yeah.
What is the difference for you?
The difference is that when you play with a band, like I always felt like I was working with a net. And then when you play on your own, you got no net. First of all, there's just more sound, right? There's just more sound. You miss a chord by yourself, there's a space. You miss a chord, there's 2 other people playing that same chord, that space isn't there, and you're not as aware of it. At least, I mean, I was aware of it, but like the room's not as aware of it. So I always felt like if I needed a minute to stare at my shoes and think about where I was, I would have it when I was with other people. I've been learning how to do that by myself, but I just get so nervous. I can't figure out like what is that? What do I have to do to get over that? Right? I would get nervous before we started to play. Like I was almost always had butterflies backstage, and then we would go on, and I would get through the first song, and I would be like, "Oh right, this is fun. I forgot. It's really fun, and I'm here with my band brothers, and it's loud, and people are digging it. It's fun." I don't get there when I play on my own, and I can't figure out what the difference is. I don't know. What do you think the difference is? Do you know? You've played with people, and you play solo. Is that how you've always been comfortable playing?
No, I mean, in general, it's always more fun and it's always better when you're playing with people. But I think, just out of necessity, I've gotten to the point where, well, I don't get a band at this gig. How am I going to fill the space by
Right,
myself? And I
right,
think that right there on its own has prompted me to really work on my timing and work on my rhythm playing,
right,
so that when I'm playing by myself, and I'm singing a song or even
right,
just picking an instrumental, I have a foundation and it's groovy, because otherwise I'd be really worried about the situation.
right, right. The other thing is that like our I play with the rhythm department with the rhythm section. My timing is good. I think I have okay, like I don't have bad timing on my own either. Like it's okay, it's not bad. But I also liked that there was a place for me to sit. Like I could listen, like I listened to the drummer and I listened to the bass player. Um, and that was a thing I learned to do early on when I started playing with them. I was like, that's where it is, right? Like that's the beat, that's where I need to be. And when you play by yourself, there's nowhere to go. It's just you, right? You're like, if I don't, like you just said, like if you don't lay it down, nobody else is, right? Like, and I don't want to beatbox. That's annoying. Like I'm not gonna have like some tinny noise, and we never played to a click, right? We never did any of that stuff. Like I was like, it's the drummer and the bass player. I'm with them. Let's go, right? And when you're alone, you're right. It's just you.
Have you been playing solo at all since?
I've played like single songs at open mics and stuff, but mostly I just play at home by myself. I would love to find, one or two other people to play with. I miss having a drummer, right? Like it made a big difference to me to have a drummer to play with. And Pete, our drummer, his timing was really good, and he was a good drummer. And so, I feel a little like I was spoiled too, right? Because my first time out, I got to play with these guys that were really good, right? They're really, really good. And so I'm a little bit fussy about who I want to play with next, which makes it hard. I would to play with these great guys for my first time out. I'm like, well, you know, I guess you take what you can get.
Yeah, but you get spoiled.
Hmm.
Ah, still not as good as blank.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The other thing is that not only don't I have any formal music training, I never was in choir. I never had any kind of like I didn't learn how to sing when I was a kid. Lots of people have these experiences. They grew up in the church and they sang with church choirs and stuff, and I don't have any of that. And so I'm self-conscious about that too. So um, that makes it hard as well.
So sounded like you kind of got the job in the band because of your voice. What did you do as a singer in the band, especially as somebody who, like you said, is not super comfortable with it?
Right, right. Well, I just did it, didn't I? I just did it. They wanted to play some very specific songs, and they needed a higher octave range, and they already had this music picked out, and some of them had like male female alternating vocals and stuff, and I just did it. And the whole thing was such a crazy experiment anyway, that I rarely thought about whether or not I was I just didn't I don't know, I just sort of forgot that I didn't know what I was doing. that makes any sense at all.
The best way to be.
I just sort of forgot. And, you know, I made mistakes. I did things badly. And I did not die. So I did them again and hoped that they were better. You know, again, if you like go back to your first question, what did I learn? Like, I also learned that if you screw up really bad, you don't die. Like nothing happens. And it occurred to me that I remember we did a big festival at Seattle Center, not the one that you went to, but one that happens earlier in the year. And we just totally flubbed the opener, right? Like the timing was wrong. I didn't hit my cue. It was just bad. Everything was bad. And we all kind of stopped and looked at each other for a minute. And like I said, hey, let's do that again. And then we did it again, right? And it was fine. Nobody cared. Right? People don't care as much as the audiences that we had didn't care as much as I thought they cared. Right? They're happy to be there. They're having a good time. We're a little bit ridiculous. They were entertained. We did what we were supposed to do. So, you know, every now and then I would have these fits of like, oh, I was completely off. What was happening there? Mostly it was bad sound too, right? If I couldn't hear myself, then I would sing badly.
That happens.
It happens, yeah. You don't hear your own voice. You don't hear your instrument. You don't hear the instrument next to you. You know, somebody's slipped out of tune over the course of the set and the sound's not good enough that you pick up on it. There's this constant and also you're on this journey to the end when you start to play anyway, right? So you kind of have to go with it. So anyway, this is a very long-winded answer to the question about playing solo, which I would love to have the confidence to do, and I don't know how to get it. Practice, probably, just like when I played with other people.
Yeah, that always helps, but I don't necessarily have any dynamite answers.
Yeah.
Like we're all looking for that.
Yeah.
Some people have it and they're just, you know, born to be on stage and they're just comfortable whether they have the skills or not.
Yeah.
And some people are a little bit more, I don't know. It's a job. It's a task to get up there and play by yourself. And I feel like, you know, when I started, I was much, much more nervous about being up there, but I think I've just done it so much. And for a while, it was almost like, okay, I'm going to get up there by myself and I'm going to sing a song. And that was like, to get to that point was a big deal.
Right.
And now you just do it enough that it's like, okay, well, I've done this before. Let's see if we can just do what we've already done.
Right.
And go from there.
I did it before. I didn't die. So I guess I could try to do it again. The other thing that I have noticed from playing a bunch of community open mics is that the level of confidence exhibited by the musician at the mic is not necessarily synchronized with their level of skill. They're totally irrelevant. I was always amazed that I could watch these people get up there and with like just completely like no timing, completely off key, they would blunder through this thing and they would look perfectly relaxed. And I would be like, wow, that was terrible and amazing. Like, how did they do that? Can they not hear themselves? Do they not care? What do they know that I don't know? What? You know, when you do these community music kind of things, you get to see that. And I always think like that's more power to them for like having the nerve to do it. But how do they do it when I'm so self-conscious and they get up there and I'm like, I don't even know what song that was, you know?
Just personalities, I guess.
Yeah, personality. Some people are just they're just totally confident. They're not very self-aware, or they don't hear themselves, or they don't care, you know?
Yeah.
And I definitely care. Like, I don't want to make anybody sit through me playing music badly. Right? Like, I don't want to waste anyone's time like that. So, yeah.
So your real job, I mean, not that.
My day job. I call it my day job, not my real job. Yeah.
Your day job.
Yeah.
That's a good correction to make.
Yeah.
Yes. Is a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're a fabulous writer.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Every I read the stuff that Pam writes and just
thank you.
I wonder about, you know, I have those same words, and they're all very simple, straightforward words, but I can't make them sound like that.
That is how I feel about the notes on my ukulele. I have the same notes and the same 4 strings, and I can't make them sound like yours do. It's exactly the same, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But you have a book coming out in the
I
fall?
do. It's called The Same River Twice, and it is a crazy travel memoir, and it is in pre-sales now. Get it wherever you get your fine book products. But don't buy it from Amazon if you don't have to. Go to IndieBound and save your local bookstore, or go to your local bookstore and ask them if they can get it, because we're in a weird time and bookstores are important.
Yeah.
It's a crazy travel memoir, and I don't want to say a whole lot more about it because I'm still working on it. But I think it's pretty good, and I'm excited about it.
I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, I'm nervous about other people reading it, but I'm thrilled that I'm actually really thrilled that it's coming out. I've been working on it for a while, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's very cool. And if
Yeah, thank
they
you.
can't wait around for the book, there's always Nerd's Eye View.
Yeah, it's a little bit fallow right now because I've been working on my book, but there's old stuff on there. There's plenty of old stuff on there, and there's little pieces. Like sometimes if you go digging, if I'm writing in an extremely nostalgic sort of way about something that happened long ago, it has probably showed up in this book that I'm working on, because that was really writing those little things is definitely the process of how I got to writing this big thing, was by feeding those ideas. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love catching up on your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Pam. Nice to see your face and hear your stories from
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Rockstar Land.
It was so fun. Can I tell you, I miss the, we used to play these big festival stages, and we would go up there, and I miss feeling the vibration of the bass under my shoes. I loved that. I just loved that. You could just like feel it. It was not even so much about hearing it. Like I could feel it in my feet, and I would be like, that's where it is. I miss that a lot. It was really fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I got to finally see you guys.
Me too.
At the festival.
Me too.
Yeah, that was really, really fun.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there's another project coming down the pipes, and
yeah,
can catch you on that.
Yeah.
Whenever that comes to pass.
Yes, please. Once the world is open again and we can all go out and play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unpause the world.
Yes.
All right. Well, take care of yourself, and
yeah,
thanks so much
too.
for coming on.
Thank you, Brad.
Okay. Bye.